Welcome, everyone, to the latest edition of the Jeff Gerstmann Hall of Fame. I'm Jeff Gerstmann. If you had told me back in 2001 that, 20 years, 20, almost 22 years later, that I would still be talking about creating content about, even, I guess, more than just talking about it, I suppose. But if you told me back then that I would be here now to talk about Rez, man, in a lot of ways it makes perfect sense. In a lot of ways, of course, I would be here all these years later, still talking about Rez, still feeling really strong feelings for Rez. I think the thing I didn't necessarily expect is that Rez would also kind of continue the conversation, I suppose. The game originally came out in 2001 in Japan, early 02 here in the States. The Japanese release was on Dreamcast and PlayStation 2. I think both versions also came out in the UK and in Europe. In the US, we only got the PlayStation 2 version of the game, but I think I'd already imported both versions by that point. And since it was released as like Rez HD in around 08, on Xbox Live Arcade for the Xbox 360, which was an amazing moment because it was like, oh my God, Rez, like Sega had been through so many things. And of course, Tetsuya Mizuguchi, like people, everyone had kind of gone their separate ways. There was like, who was the champion of Rez? Who was there to be the flag bearer for that? The idea that it was all able to come back together and that there would be a new version of Rez released was crazy back then. And of course, then Rez Infinite came along years after that, and I'm mostly sticking here to the original release and kind of how I felt at the time. But just to touch on it briefly, Rez Infinite is like the single case I think you need for why virtual reality is a success. Creatively, if not commercially, or like whatever other metrics you want to judge it by, the idea that the technology finally exists to play Rez in a format that feels like it was destined for all along. Whether that's the themes of the game of, this hacker inside the machine flying through cyberspace and everything, like those are themes that are tailor-made, I think, for, the virtual reality experience. But, more than that, it feels like the ultimate realization of what Rez always was. But you don't need all of that to necessarily enjoy Rez, I guess, is kind of the point here when I talk about those original releases of Rez. This Rez came along late in the Dreamcast life cycle. I think we all kind of knew that the Dreamcast was not a success, not something that was going to really successfully compete with the release of the PlayStation 2. And I believe that the PlayStation 2 version of Rez would be the first Sega game published on a non-Sega platform by Sega. I mean, I unless we go back to, I don't know, I'm sure there's like what the Commodore 64 version of well, they were, yeah, it wasn't them, but anyway, Congo Bongo on the Atari 800 or something. I don't know, but point being, you know, Sega had been for decades thought of as the major or a major player in the video game hardware game, and so it was unheard of. The mere idea that Sega was going to publish their games on PlayStation 2 seemed, you know, blasphemous in the extreme. But even as someone who was not really I was not lying to myself about where the Dreamcast was. Getting the news, getting the rumors, hearing the reports that Sega was going to be getting off of the Dreamcast was still a really mind-blowing concept. Because Sega and the Dreamcast and that period of time felt like they were at a creative peak. You know, this was a time when it felt like Sega had split up into all these different teams that were going off and doing all of these different things. And Rez was, you know, made by a team known as United Game Artists at the time. And, you know, Mizuguchi came out of, you know, the Sega Rally franchise. You had other people that had worked on the Panzer Dragoon games here working on Rez, which, you know, makes a ton of sense when you think about the type of video game Rez actually is. But they were going for something more. They were reaching to try to achieve something beyond like the typical video game. I don't think that's hyperbolic to say that. I think that's when you hear them talk about those times and those days and the thing that they were attempting to make. You know, these were ideas that had existed for years, but they had felt that the, you know, technology wasn't ready for it yet in some ways. And the merging of music and gameplay and the way they did it in ways that made it so, you know, Rez is a rhythmic game, but it is not a rhythm game. It does all the thinking for you when it comes to making sure that the music sounds like music. You're not playing the tunes. You're not playing off beat. You're not playing on beat. You are playing a shooter that is unfolding rhythmically in front of you. And I think that kind of pulsating, well-timed gameplay and enemy placement and having everything just so in a way that helps to kind of build the audio and build the music as you play through a level is straight up artistry. It's wild when you really sit down and look at it and listen to it. It is an amazing feat for its day. I love Rez. When I saw Rez pre-release, it was everything I wanted out of a thing. You know, it was just like the exact visual style that I was interested in and then some. And it was cool. Video games, you know, we don't really think about it now because they're so mainstream and there are a lot of cool video games. There were not. Rez Rez felt different. Rez felt artistically driven and artistically different than a lot of the other video games of its era. That is not to say it's the first video game that was truly, you know, it's the Citizen Kane of, you know, like I don't want to overstate things on that front in a way that demeans the games that came before it, right? But I think at a time when Sega was really doing a great job of making incredibly stylish games, of course, some of the same crew would have made Space Channel 5 prior to this, and you know, just the aesthetic that a lot of Sega games maintained, even back into the Sega Rally days, even back into the Saturn days, like you know, your jet set radios and all of these things that just had cool modern looks that felt very on brand with, you know, I guess I you know, like it's a weird like youth culture at the time, you know, like the visual style, like the way everything was coming together, the way Japan had kind of been ascendant in certain circles artistically, and there's just, I don't know, a lot of things converged around that time to make the Dreamcast the right console for its era artistically. But it's totally easy to understand why commercially that didn't pan out, right? And Rez initially didn't exactly pan out. It was not a smash hit. It did not save the Dreamcast. It didn't, not that it was trying to per se, but it makes me, I feel things about Rez. Rez is an emotional experience for me in a lot of ways. And when I think about where I was then, and those were some of the first years when I was going to Japan for the first time and seeing a game like that on display. I think the game was initially announced at E3, but then going to TGS and seeing more of it, and seeing, or just going to TGS and seeing, the Dreamcast offering in full. This was a time when, I saw the Dreamcast with a zip drive under it, under glass, and all the MP3 player VMU and all the weird stuff that they claimed they were going to be doing with the Dreamcast in the future that, none of it ever really panned out. But again, I think that, the future that Sega was heading for felt like a very enticing one. It felt like one that was very, of its era aesthetically. When we go back and we look at all the, now, gosh, it's weird to think that there's all these. Well, they've been around they've been around so long that it feels like the wave has crashed even on again. But like the Y2K aesthetic blogs that exist and all this stuff, and people are like, look at these iMacs, they had all these colors. I'm like, well, the iMac was technically, but you get my point. Like there was a lot of things happening just visually around that time that I think that Rez taps into a lot of those things. And it was the sort of thing that when I saw it, I knew I needed to see more of it, and I knew I needed to have that. My regret now is that I only bought the middle tier limited edition version of the game when I imported it from Japan, because there was I think they maybe only made like 500 of them or something, but like the Rez perfect set or whatever it was that came with headphones and a t-shirt and like eye drops or something. And I should have pulled the trigger on that version of the game back then, because I bet they're real hard to find now. But that's okay. Like the other thing is, like, Rez is everywhere now. That's the beautiful thing about it, is it's been re-released in a perfect format with Rez Infinite, with its VR support and higher resolution graphics and so many of these other things that really. Again, if you had told me back then, this is the thing. If you told me back then that there would be updated releases of Rez that looked even better, and that there would be an additional mode, and that virtual reality would have come back around again and been popular, like that would have been like, you're crazy. But that sounds really cool, and that's what we got. Sometimes the future ain't so bad after all, I guess. Why don't we play some Rez? We're going to play the Dreamcast version here, the Japanese Dreamcast release. And then maybe we'll take a look at, Rez Infinite running on a modern PC, just for kicks too. I apologize in advance that I don't have like good full saves of unlocks for this stuff. Unfortunately, I have a PS2 memory card somewhere that has everything, but that's probably in a storage locker by now. Rez is a very simple video game. It is a rail shooter, not unlike Panzer Dragoon, but it is even unlike Panzer Dragoon. You cannot like rotate the camera at will. It will occasionally do some rotating for you. But it's funny, these I honestly, I have not spent that much time with the Dreamcast version of the game, because when it came out, I primarily played it on PS2 with the Trance Vibrator. I think, you know, all of the music is good in its own way, but when I think about Rez and the music of Rez, Buggy Running Beeps is the track that always comes to mind for me. This first level of Rez, I think, is just perfect. Just perfect. So what I'm doing is, you know, it's lock-on targeting a la Panzer Dragoon, and, you know, it's a behind-the-back shooter, not unlike, I don't know, like, it feels like Sega's made a billion games like this over the decades, right? With Panzer Dragoon, I think, being like the most kind of recent example of it when Rez came out, and maybe the most direct in a lot of ways. But also, you know, you could look at Afterburner or Space Harrier, certainly Planet Harriers, which was, you know, kind of right there too. So when I hold down, I'm moving this cursor around. That's really all I'm doing. And I can lock onto, I believe, up to 8 different targets at once when I hold it down. Hold on. Don't let that get away. And when I let off, it shoots at everything I've locked onto. So there's, you know, 1, 2, pop, pop. And you see how it is quantizing the action. It is, even though I'm moving around in real time and I'm holding down the button and I'm locking onto things in real time, you see that when I let off the button, the shots come rhythmically. And that's how they make the game feel, that's how they make the player feel like they are, you know, almost composing in a way, even though really there's nothing about the gameplay per se that requires you to play rhythmically. I can also kind of just mash the fire button here, which when some of these larger, you know, waves of enemies are coming, it's sometimes beneficial to just take it all out at once. And you get a little like a 808 clap every time you push the button. But even that happens quantized and rhythmically in a way that, like, you can kind of play along with it if you want. You don't really need to. You can just add your little thing there. And to, you know, get through the levels, we are, you know, those little icons I'm shooting that are kind of taking us to the next layer show up over time, and you just kind of work your way through it. You try not to get shot. The overdrives I have there in the corner are like smart bombs that will get me out of jams. In the lower left, I'm kind of ascending form. You see I've changed forms here. That's another collectible here that you're getting, and it's kind of giving you lives in a sense. Like when I get hit, I will kind of de-res down to a lower form until I run out of forms and lose, basically. I am not perfect at Rez. I never have been. I find the final boss in Rez to be still a little tough at times. Okay. Something about playing this game in 4x3, like going back to it like this, it feels very claustrophobic. Like these enemies feel very much on top of me in a way that when you stretch it out onto modern displays, the whole game has a little bit more room to breathe. That's doubly so playing it in VR, where things are kind of stretched out to be all around you a little bit more. Like the game feels much more expansive than this. This is really interesting, going back and playing the Dreamcast version. It's been a long time. All right, here we go. It's so serious now. Okay. Oh. Ah. I'm gonna beat it back a little bit here. Okay. It's easy to get kind of locked in on doing damage to the boss and kind of forget all of these other things that are suddenly coming at you if you're not careful. So really, you know, I'm holding down the button and letting off the button. Really, I'm kind of charging up these lock-ons. I'm locking onto to multiple targets. And actually, in the case of these missiles that are coming my way, I'm letting off a lot more frequently. Here we'll kind of shoot at these lit-up edges of the spiral. Otherwise, I think it'll just keep shooting at me. We don't want that. Now we have to worry about these little spinning blades coming at us here. Oh. Maybe not the most efficient run there, I suppose. I don't know. There's, you know, the game does keep some score here, but it's primarily like, hey, did you shoot down 100% of the enemies or not? Did you collect all of the support items that you could have gotten? Like, those are the sorts of things that you're primarily judged by when it comes to unlocking things. But that's okay. And now we've unlocked level 2. Once you've unlocked a level, you can go back to it any time, but we are in an evolved state here. We have basically like, bonus lives. And so if we leave now, we lose those and we start back at the default form. There have been some very interesting prototypes of this game that have gotten out over the years. A lot of the things discussed about its development that you always thought like, oh, it would be really cool to see, because they had levels for this that they were testing with Fatboy Slim songs. And that stuff surfaced. Which is it's crazy to go back and look at now. But also, I don't think I think if there had been, they went out and found artists that were name artists and stuff for it. No one that was maybe as mainstream big as Fatboy Slim would have been in the early 2000s. But I think if this game had a lot of music that was more recognizable or whatever, I think that we would not be talking about this game today. I think it would be way less interesting if it had, Rockefeller Skank in it or whatever. I just don't. I think this soundtrack is pretty timeless. In a way that I think if it had more recognizable songs, it wouldn't. I don't think it would have been as good or as memorable. I don't know. There are multiple soundtracks for this game, as well as sound data ripped out from the game itself that people kind of grab onto, and that's great. The catch is that it's sometimes hard to because of the way these songs build upon themselves as you go through the layers, it becomes a little tricky to represent it outside of the game. And so a lot of the soundtrack stuff is good, but it doesn't always scratch the same itch that hearing these songs in context does. And I think that's cool. I think that, that they did meaningful things with the music in the game and the way that the tracks build upon themselves and everything else in ways that make the video game a vital part of the package musically. I accidentally just tapped the overdrive button and wasted an overdrive, which is sort of a smart bomb that will just automatically kill everything on screen for a few seconds. It's useful, in boss fights and some stuff like that, I guess. You see what how it's handling these attacks from the side. It's automatically rotating around there. I'm not Panzer Dragooning it over there to look at it myself or anything like that. I don't have to have that level of situational awareness. Generally speaking, it will show me the things that are important. Hey, there's enemies here now. Hey, there's enemies here now. And so, if we're judging this purely as just hey, it's a rail shooter and whatever else, and kind of discounting a lot of the other parts of the game, then it's a very easy game to pick apart on paper. And so I actually found it very tough to review the game when it came out, because it's a game with 5 levels and some bonus stuff. It's a rail shooter that is from a gameplay perspective, less complicated than Panzer Dragoon, a Saturn game that had come out years prior. And, you know, kind of a one button experience. And that's the sort of stuff that when you're reviewing games on a more traditional scale, more traditional metrics that we, you know, that are largely not gone now, but I think they are treated a little more appropriately in the grand scheme of what a game has to offer. It becomes very hard to it can become a hard game to recommend in some cases. That said, I don't know that I don't know that I necessarily had a problem recommending Rez to people. It's I think that its sense of style, and I think that the kind of things that we thought of then as perhaps a little more intangible, spoke very loudly on the games we have. So as we're shooting these buttons, it's, you know, chipping this thing apart so that we don't get hit by it. So a bit of a time crunch. A bit of one, not. I think the difficulty in Rez only comes when you want to play it a highly specific way, like perfectly, and not miss anything, and not get hit, and all of that stuff. Like there are some of the patterns later on in some of the other boss fights that become occasionally a little hard to manage. But not impossible. Like, again, you know, it is not an incredibly difficult game. Any minute now, we're going to get to start doing damage. Here we go. When it comes to the boss fights, I find myself mashing the button a lot more than kind of charging up attacks, because there's just a lot of shit heading your way that you kind of want to deal with. Oh god. As quickly as you can. I got hit there. Even on a 4x3, so I'm going to hit the overdrive here because I'm about to get overwhelmed. I was gonna say, even on a 4x3 screen, sometimes this stuff can get a little ahead of you. Man. There. Man. Oof. That was a mess. There's a mess in there. seems like it's seconds away from going bad. Yeah, I'm gonna hit another overdrive. Man, I'm having trouble here. Jesus, really? Wow. I can't believe that happened. Wow. Of course, when I'm recording, right? Woo! That's nuts, man. All right, why don't we take a look at Rez Infinite? So that's it running on a Dreamcast. When you play it on a PlayStation 2, what are the trade-offs? Is that this run runs at 60, but the other one is de-interlaced, or vice versa? I forget what the exact differences between the two versions are. But generally, I found the PlayStation 2 version to be a little more palatable back in the day. Man, can't believe that. All right, let's fire up Rez Infinite here, and you can kind of see where it is now. This version came out in 2017, and added VR support, but not it doesn't necessarily require virtual reality to enjoy. All right, let's give me this. Give me the game. What are we doing? I had it a minute ago before we started doing this, but let's hang on here. Very weird. All right. When I was getting it earlier, I was running it windowed, so let's try switching it to windowed and making sure that we... It's very weird. It's always something with this stuff, you know? It's not a perfect science. It's almost like we were just never meant to do this, but here we are. Yeah, okay. Let's do this instead. Okay. I kind of want to... Well, you know, since we just took a look at it, I'll show you what this level looks like now. Running at a higher frame rate, widescreen. Missed one already. Okay. Get dialed in here, man. It does have like score attack modes and stuff like that, but to be totally honest with you, I've never really bothered to learn like how the scoring in Rez works. Like, do you get more points for doing longer combos, like holding down the button for a longer chain, or, you know, Does that matter? Do I get more points for mashing the button out and killing everything one off? I couldn't tell you. It's never been important to me. Like, it's never been... Like, there's the traveling mode in this, which you may have seen on the menu, which on that Dreamcast version is the default, like, top item on the menu, is a no-fail mode. You know, they really seem to be open to the idea of just like, hey, this is an experience. Like, it doesn't, you know, if you can't handle the shooting, it's fine. It's not that big of a deal. It's not really ultimately what the entire experience is about. But this is this is a beautiful version of this game, and it's so cool to have it. I kind of can't say enough about how cool the VR stuff is. It is really one of the, and you could take this as a condemnation of VR also, because it is still. Even after all the years that we've had consumer-grade VR with us, this is still, after all these years, probably my first recommendation for people that are just like, what's good in VR? It's like, you should get Rez. Because, you know, things really haven't moved, but, like, that's still... Okay, we're almost back there. Let's see if we'll be able to see how it goes next time. And in VR, you can play it a few different ways. Like, you know, when the PlayStation VR 2 version that came out, because that headset has eye tracking, they added support for aiming with your eyes. Which, you know, you can also kind of turn your head or, you know, use your hand to, you know, move a cursor on screen. The eye tracking, I did not find to be a great way to play the game. I found like I couldn't, like if the cursor wasn't actually moving where I wanted it to when I would look, like, or like around the edges of the screen. It didn't seem like it worked all that well. I don't know. All right, here we go. Let's try and do it less bad this time. No guarantees. I love all this stuff, the little, you know, computery text when you're locking onto enemies up in the corner and everything. Like, it's, you don't really have a lot of time to read it, but I think it is really just good flavor stuff. All right, now we'll do this. I think, you know, the visuals of this game really hold up really well, and also, you know, I think you would agree that the art style in this game is really ripe for, you know, running at higher resolutions, and, you know, just kind of the almost wireframe style of some of its visuals. When you sharpen all that up, it just looks incredible. So as much as this is a 20-year-old game, it doesn't really feel like one. You know, especially with the VR editions and everything else, like, it still feels very modern. In ways that, you know, you just think like, well, yeah, I guess, you know, at the end of the day, Rez was ahead of its time in a lot of ways. for as much as, again, I think, you know, from a gameplay perspective, you could sit there and pick it apart and go like, man, that Saturn game with the dragon they put out years before this is a deeper, more engaging video game experience, to which I'd say, yeah, maybe we're looking at the wrong things. Cut these things down before they have enough time to launch a billion stupid mines at me. And then sometimes your guy is in the way of seeing, you know, there's a little bit of camera trickery that they do here to make it harder to see some of this stuff. Man. Ugh. All right. See? Easy. Oh, man. We analyzed the heck out of some stuff. We shot all... Well... Hey, listen. Sometimes you're going to miss some stuff. As you see here, because I've unlocked all the levels here, it just shows as open. Let's move forward. As you play, you know, the game does have a defined story, but it doesn't really spend too much time in-game telling you what that is. You know, you can kind of infer things about the, you know, from the setup about like, oh, humanity created this big network system and then the AI at the center of it shut down and you've got to hack your way in and wake it back up. And it is, you know, touching on concepts like the singularity and what it means to be alive and so on and so forth. And you see some of that progression in the visual style of the levels as you go through them, kind of when you get to Area 5. You start to see, like, oh, okay, that's what you've been getting at this whole time. Okay. But as far as, like, you know, inspiration on the whole of video games, like, do you think that Rez left a mark? Sometimes I'm not sure that it did, you know? It is a relatively singular experience in a lot of ways. Well, you know, obviously, so Child of Eden is the kind of spiritual successor to Rez that Ubisoft published. While it did come out on PlayStation 3, it is oftentimes thought of as a Kinect game, even though you did not have to play it with the Kinect. It was kind of caught up in a lot of that marketing stuff, and so it was a lot of like finger pointing to shoot, like similar gameplay type stuff. Child of Eden did nothing for me, I'm sad to say. That said, I have not gone back to it since it was new, and I have been overdue in doing that because I'm just kind of curious now, because I've forgotten a lot of the specifics about it. And again, you know, like I primarily played it as a Kinect game, and I think it was a failure on that front because the aiming just wasn't reliable, you know, for Kinect reasons. Creation. Let the samples hit you over the head a little bit. Like, oh, creation. Right. I see where we maybe are going with this. All right, here we go. Like that little spot right there is where you see just a touch of Space Harrier. All right, time to mash some buttons here. Ah. Yeah, it's been a while. I ain't got it like I had it. Gotta get my Rez game up. Oh, hi. Ah! Fuck, man. All right. Pop an overdrive here. We've got a lot of them. Ugh. Ah! Oh. Thought I was about to eat it right there. Very, master control sort of vibe. Now these diamond-shaped enemies here will kind of keep lowering as they go around, much like the Atari 2600 Classic Atlantis, I suppose. They will, as they go around, they will get closer and closer to hitting me, which you obviously don't want that. So close. Uh-oh. One's coming in hot. There it is. Got it. Okay. There we go. Done. All right. We got all the support items at least. But yeah, you unlock, there's like bonus laser types and stuff. I forget what all the... And I think if you had Space Channel 5 save data on a memory unit, that you could play as a Marolian in the original game. I imagine that is not in here in that same way. Well, heck, let's keep playing through these areas here. I really love the way these tracks build from layer to layer. At one point, back when I was writing a lot more music, I actually made this like 8-minute thing that was like, no, and I wanted to kind of break for a little bit and then come back harder each time, like thinking about the way a Rez level, like the music for a Rez level might have been structured. It was like an interesting little thought experiment for me. Uh-oh, there's suddenly a lot of shit on the screen.
funny, like even though there's only 5 levels, like I have pretty exacting memories of the first level and the second level to some extent. Level 4 of Rez here. It's been a while. This stuff's, as you might imagine, this stuff is kind of a trip in VR. Highly worth it. Would I recommend you run out and buy a headset? Maybe not, but if you know someone who has one, make them get Rez if they don't have it already, so that you can play it. Steal their headset and buy a copy of Rez and check it out in VR. Okay. Uh-oh, did I miss one? I did. Okay. All right, here we go. Just gotta do this. We're almost there. This fucking guy. Picked up his new cubes. Ah, get away from me. You could make some kind of sick argument that this boss fight clearly inspired by Sewer Shark with the weird kind of off the side running away. We gotta get him. Uh-oh. No. Okay. Get away from me, you weirdo. This is also maybe the one section in the main game that gives you kind of this free camera control. All right, I got him. Before he could even try to fall on me. Oh. That's a good one. It's just like just a good visual, a good weird, like, what even am I looking at? Why is it now a guy who is running? What the hell is going on? Like really good weird style. So those are the 4 levels, and now we can go to level 5, which is the final area. Which on this save, apparently I have not completed. It's kind of the other problem with this game being really, like, it has a lot of stuff of just like, play the game for 5 hours and you'll unlock this. And it's like, I've definitely done that, but it's been across the Oculus Quest and the, PlayStation VR 1 and 2, And here we get a little bit of story along the way throughout the level. Level 5 decided it's going to talk at you a little bit. get really hung up on like, oh man, I can't let that thing get away because I'm trying to get 100% shot down. And then you don't realize like, oh man, the gate is coming up. I need to shoot the gate fast. Oh, yeah, I knew it was going to get got eventually. You don't even see it coming half the time. In situations like this, just get so locked in on something else on screen. I'm just going to pop one. Okay. So I've always found the final boss fight here, it's really long compared to the other boss fights, and I don't always win. So, you know, we'll get there. But what's going to happen when we get there, I can't say for sure. Okay. I'd say we're in pretty good shape, but literally we can't be in better shape right now. Full of overdrives, highest form. Just don't get hit ever again. Easy, right? 78%. Okay, we're getting close. Getting close. I think it's interesting how in this stage you get some of these like static environments where, you know, things are still technically moving on a track, but the background is stationary. It's like, it's jarring, you know, as you kind of go through the entire game. Okay. Here we go. It's a great question, really. So this serves as a boss rush. You'll see that this enemy is largely inspired by the structure and attacks of the first area boss. You turn over here and there's just like 9 things coming at you. You're like, oh, jeez. Where did that stuff come from? See what I mean? Almost. Oh, I got it. I got it. Might be a good spot for me to say I should have probably just popped an overdrive there. In fact, okay, that was level 2. What was the level 3 boss? Why? Right. So I guess like a clock thing going here where if I let them fill up, they will fire. Okay, that felt pretty good. I mean, a little bit, like ever so slightly, let's say. Uh-oh. Handle it so far anyway. Oh, I got hit. Apparently I can't. Ugh. All right. Come on, fucker. Not in bad shape for this part, I guess. But this is the part I'm always worst at. Oh, right. All right. Now we're getting somewhere. But if only it were that easy. So this is the part where I've just become less certain as to what's actually a threat. Obviously that diamond flying around is, or where is it right now? Okay. Okay. I think they made some, for Rez Infinite, you know, especially I think when you're playing in VR, they make some adjustments to the difficulty in terms of like, hey, how spread out do you want these enemies to be in your viewpoint? Or, you know, like, do you want to be spread out wide so you got to turn around all crazy, or do you want it all to kind of play out in front of you the way the original game did? And I think in some ways, Rez Infinite is a little bit friendlier than the original game. Okay. I am just mashing the crap out of this button. All right. Also, I can never remember how many phases there are. I think there's one more after this. How about we punch this? We've got him. Might as well use him. Yeah. Did we do it? We did it. Right? Ugh. Not long on post game. Yeah, it's just feels so good. And the look, the aesthetic as it changes from level to level, of course, you know, just there's so much working in concert in Rez. That it really just, you know, I think it works on every level, you know. I think it comes together, you know, in such a, I keep, you know, all these, you know, musical terms or whatever, but like this harmonious way. Games don't feel like that all that often, you know. Systems and mechanics and, you know, like work in concert to, you know. And there is I think there is a better ending depending on a few other factors. I think. Plenty of games like mesh systems together well and everything. I don't mean to, again, like demean other games when I say stuff like this, but I think that everything in this game, whether it's aesthetics or just, you know, just the aesthetically, I think it comes together and it is fun. It feels good to play. It is never overly difficult. But it's difficult enough. It's active enough to kind of keep you on your toes. And in some ways you wonder, like, you know, I don't know that, like, in this day and age, no, but like originally, what would have happened if Rez had come out in arcades? I mean, they would have had to do something so that people could hear it, because it's kind of such an important part of the experience, not necessarily the gameplay, but you know, in a loud arcade setting or something like that. I just wonder, you know, would that have been anything? Because it is, you know, it's 5 levels and you're kind of in and out, and in a way that, you know, might have worked weirdly enough as an arcade game, that type of length, the length of like an Afterburner or a Space Harrier or something of that nature. Of course, by the early 2000s, that concept did not fly nearly as well as it did in the, you know, the mid 80s, the late 80s. But yeah, it's a special game. It's a really special game. One of the most, you do eventually unlock some additional you know, options here. I think the music here in this kind of lost area mission is some of my favorite in the game. The level itself is not incredible. And seeing some of these other, you know, now we can play in score attack mode and all of this stuff. And again, that's not really, the idea of a score attack for Rez is not especially interesting to me. as far as like the experience is concerned. But I do like it to have a challenge, right? I mean, it has that traveling mode which is basically a no-fail mode. And I don't think that's necessarily awesome either. It's cool that it's in there. I don't know what the story is with this level. I don't know if if this was something of a test level or something that they decided to leave in, or if it was just something that kind of made custom because they wanted to put this track in it in the game and didn't find another spot for it, or what. But this the level itself is, as you can see, fairly plain compared to a lot of the levels in the main game. I think this game is another weird entry on my journey. When it comes to electronic music. Early 2000s, and even just from the mid 90s through to those kind of like those Wipeout XL days, Prodigy, Future Sound of London, and some of that stuff. It was like I didn't sink in super deep into any of those genres. Instead, I think, and this is just how it happened in America. Firestarter was a huge fucking song. Not long after Wipeout XL came out, Fat of the Land would come out and be a monster of an album. And then you would have the Crystal Method. And the Chemical Brothers and stuff like that were certainly like well represented, but I think like they're, in terms of just like mainstream accessibility, the fucking action movie, nightclub scene, techno, electronica, big beat, whatever of Crystal Method and the Prodigy, I think really blew up here in a way that, like, the Chemical Brothers maybe didn't. That fucking thing's gonna shoot me, man. Ah! And so it was kind of, that stuff got big, and then it faded away almost like a fad for a lot of people, or it just became, like the record companies and whoever else just like slapped the word electronica out there to avoid having to engage with any of this music in any kind of like weird subgenre level. And so everything got seen through that lens. And so anything that was more esoteric or, or whatever was easy to push aside from like a mainstream or whatever sort of way. But like at the same time, all that stuff was happening. There was, you did see the rave culture stuff happening in the 90s. But it was something that, like I was focused on fucking West Coast hip hop. I didn't give a fuck what these neo hippies were doing. It's like, we're taking drugs and loving each other. Fuck that shit. We've got 9mm and bricks in the hood over here. I don't have time to love anyone, all right? Let alone myself. And so it's interesting because, I kind of found myself through the pandemic going back and listening to a lot of house music and stuff that I missed in the 90s because it, just wasn't popular. It was not MTV popular. Some of the house adjacent stuff that did get popular, where there was like, I don't know, CNC Music Factory, like that obviously got popular. You had Snap with the Power. Like there were tracks, individual tracks that would get big, but they almost felt like novelty hits in a way with the way they landed in the US. So like when 3 AM Eternal came out, you had no idea what the KLF was about. It was just like, here's this guy sitting in the back of a fucking cop car rapping into a fucking CB like a cop radio, and that's the fucking coolest shit I've seen in a while. What are these girls doing with him? They're like passed out next to him. That's fucking crazy. That's a cool video. I don't know what these pyramids are about. And then that was kind of, other than that, in the song with Tammy Wynette, like you didn't really see a lot of them in the States, unless you were like deeper down that rabbit hole than MTV would ever take you. And so it's been interesting going back and just been like, I'm gonna fucking listen to a bunch of random acid house and see if any of it, if I like any of it, and be like, no, I like this. This stuff is all right. And that's something I never would have said in the early to mid 90s. My head was not there in any way, shape, or form. But through video games, dance music, electronic music, a lot of that stuff I think became much more accessible, and I think it became, again, more accessible to a wider range of people in ways that, like, when Fat of the Land came out, it was huge. Like that was the only thing I listened to for a good long time. Like I was just like, this is fucking crazy. And it's got Cool Keith on it, which, we were not that far removed from Dr. Octagon and Sex Style and some of that stuff, which was really kind of Cool Keith getting on the map in my world. Outside of kind of the Ultramagnetic, which I'd heard of, but never really, it was just like, I don't know, here's another East Coast hip hop group of that era, and that's fine. Yeah, Papa Large. All right, gotcha. Yeah. Rez intersects a lot of different things that I think gaming and culture and whatever else had been building up to it. I don't think that was something that they necessarily intended, but when I think about the way electronic music, the way house music, dance music, whatever, like the way it built into a more mainstream thing over the back half of the 90s to have this game come out 2001, I think like it kind of feels like that pinnacle moment for me personally. Rez is a game that I feel like broadened my horizons as a person. Not necessarily in grandiose ways, but in terms of just like again, electronic music, again, that kind of like idea of man meets machine singularity, and in a way that like Tron I think touched on for me as a kid, where I was having such a bad time in the early 80s as a elementary school kid, just a bad time in school, and I just didn't like kids and bullies and whatever else, that it was very easy to think like, man, if I could just live inside the computer, this would all go away. None of this would be a problem. And Rez, I think, taps into another level of that, almost in a spirituality kind of sense. I'm not really a spiritual person in any way, I think, whatever, believe what you want, just leave me the fuck alone about it. Don't come knocking on my door with your goddamn pamphlets and whatever. But yeah, I don't know. There's like there's a chapter 1, chapter 2 to Tron and Rez for me. That
end up touching me in a very deep way that I find hard to put to words sometimes, to be honest. Like, but I think Rez is such a focused statement of bringing together music and games without being a music game, and limiting its appeal in ways that, like, if it, if you had to play that game rhythmically, I don't think it would be nearly as fun. I don't, that maybe that would be an interesting thought experiment or option or something, but like rhythm gameplay in a shooter or in, action games and whatever else, I think is a really hard tightrope to walk. And I think there are a lot of people that are just not interested in that. And I think maybe that limited Rez's appeal because people probably thought it was more of a music game than it was. Like, music is very important to Rez, obviously, but again, you don't have to have rhythm to play it. It's not a game you need to play rhythmically in any way. And so I think that, less so than even like a Space Channel 5, it's which is a rhythm game. Rez was ahead of its time, but also came at the exact right time, I guess, if that makes any sense. I think for where a lot of culture and art and everything else and design, where a lot of things were in the early 2000s, Rez feels like it is, again, at the exact right place at the exact right time. And people were not really ready for what it was putting down, just like it wasn't, was not some big mainstream hit. And so it's incredible that it's been able to get these kind of checkpoint releases along the way. Rez HD in the late 2000s. And then, kind of another 9 years later or whatever for Rez Infinite, and being able to have these upgrades of just like, oh man, remember how that game looked at that low resolution? Well, now it's running 1080p on an Xbox 360. And you're like, neat. That's cool. It's a little something off about it, but this is cool. And then Rez Infinite, I think, just closes that loop. I hope that we see, and Rez Infinite, we didn't play it here because it's not really germane to the discussion of Rez, but Rez Infinite has an additional level in it that gives you much more control over the player movement called Area X. And it is the new thing in Rez Infinite. And it is in some ways thought of, I guess internally even, it was thought of as sort of a prototype for like, if we were to make more Rez, here's what it might look like. And Area X is really cool. It's really neat. It's a different thing, because you do have you have control over your speed and all this other stuff. And, it really, benefits from being played in VR. So again, you don't have to. And it's a really cool thing. I would love to see that. I would love to see more Rez. I would love to see whether that's the Area X concept kind of blown up into a full game and iterated on, or something that kind of is like, oh, maybe that's not the direction we like. Whatever form it takes, I would love to see what the next thought is in this lineage, because we've had Rez, we've had Child of Eden, which I now I have to go back and play that. I need to go back and see that again, because I have not seen it since it came out, and I did not like it. And then the re-releases of Rez to kind of advance things, and then of course like the installation based stuff where they've got the weird, and I feel like honored, honestly, that I was able to put on the big synesthesia suit, the big vibration suit, and play. It was before Rez Infinite had come out. It was when they were first showing it off at one of the PlayStation Experience things in San Francisco. And I wasn't going to go at all. And then I heard that Rez was going to be there. And I literally was like watching the stream of the event when it was being shown. And then I was like, fuck. And I got in my car and drove there and played it, put on the suit. My PSN icon is still the picture of me wearing the suit. And then talked to a few people that I saw around afterwards, and walked around a little bit, said hi to some folks, and then left. That was the only game I showed up, played Rez, left. And
Yeah, it was cool. The suit is cool. It's obviously not practical. But it leaves you to wonder. I don't know, like in some ways I think it's very easy to think of Rez Infinite as the ultimate form of that game. VR and Rez go together amazingly well. It's profound. Again, it's if the only thing, if that headset only ran Rez Infinite, it would all still feel worth it to me, you know. Which maybe is a case for like getting your own synesthesia suit. I think it's more expensive than the headset would be. Is there another? I mean, we can't. You know, we'd have to sit here and predict the future of technology and input interfaces and whatever else to really answer that question. But I wonder, like, will there be another release of Rez that supports some new crazy, even crazier, unthought of technology in another 10 years? I'd like to think so, but at the same time, you know, for a game that came out in the early 2000s, which is between waves, right? You know, because VR existed in the 90s. It was a commercial failure. It was brought to arcades. It was, you know, it was not great technology. And then it kind of vanished for decades, only to resurface as a Kickstarter, which is insane when you think about it. And so Rez existed in a world that had seen and rejected virtual reality. And Rez and its creators and all, you know, the licensing efforts, the IP holder, like everyone lasted long enough for VR to come back in style and come together again and put out an updated version. And that's great. But any form you can play it in, I think even going back to the original 4x3 Dreamcast and PlayStation 2 releases, I think Rez is worthwhile. And when we're talking about the Jeff Gerstmann Hall of Fame, the games don't get much bigger than Rez. Yeah. So thanks everyone for watching. We'll be back next time. Rez is too new. we got to get back to some older games. It's weird talking about these newfangled polygonal video games. No, yeah. Thanks everyone for watching. We'll be back next time with some additional inductees into the Jeff Gerstmann Hall of Fame. I'll see you then.